The time of the American Revolution, when the men were all down in Philadelphia, at that time state affairs were still handled by men. The convention, the Constitutional Convention down in Philadelphia was a bunch of men. And when, I think it was John Adams came back, or maybe while he was down there, I think the Constitutional Convention was in 1787. The revolution had broken out in 1776, so the Constitutional Convention was only a few years later. And Mrs. Adams wrote to her husband, Mr. Adams, it was the kind of way you addressed the husband that time, Mr. Adams, you are planning and negotiating the independence of our country. Now what about the independence of us women? She wrote him. You find in the letters, something like that. What about the independence of us women? What are you doing for us women? Because the women were already doing their mental arithmetic. If you men are making yourselves independent, why shouldn't we women also be independent? And from then on, American women have been uncontrollable. Again, I exaggerate, that's a wild generalization, but as a general, they are particularly uncontrollable. Because their men are, by ideal and by their ideals and by their beliefs, they worship independence. The American Revolution is the very basis of the United States. They worship independence, so the women worship independence as well. It's like they're simply following their men. And today's men are such creeps that they're quite happy to have independent women who aren't a drag on them. If my woman is hanging around me, she's a drag. So if I don't want my woman to be a drag, I'm going to be happy if she makes herself independent. And then you see, especially in the United States, probably here also, you see in the airports when you watch families, flying and so on and so on. You can see I used to be able to see the wife wanting her husband's attention, wanting to be able to lean on him, wanting to be with him, and the husband sort of pushing her away. Look, I'm the Lone Ranger, you be the Lone Rangeress, and make our children into little mini Lone Rangers. And they will all be independent and I will be free. I will be free. Marriage is a bond. And freedom is the opposite of a bond. It's a bind. Marriage is a bind. Well, usually they say bond. But marriage is a bind. So if you want to be free, you don't want to be married. Or if you are married, then you don't want her hanging around you. You want her... Modern ideals are dead against family. You find all of these things in those 4 volumes.
Could I just ask the question, the development of the feminist ideal started with the suffragettes.
Yes.
I mean, it's very hard to make people see that. They believe that the suffragettes were simply votes for women and nothing else. Would you agree?
I think that's... People don't want to see the falseness of the modern world that they're building. They don't want to recognize that they are cut off from reality and they're into an imaginary world which doesn't correspond to reality. Therefore, the independence of women is a good thing. And if women have got independent, they think that's a good thing. They don't see it as a problem. They don't see it as making a major contribution to the breakup of the family, which of course it does. And as you say, they limit then the suffragette movement, which is a consequence of the independence of woman. It's not the cause of the independence of woman. It's not... Feminism wasn't caused by the suffragette movement. Feminism caused the suffragette. Suffragettism didn't cause feminism. Feminism caused suffragettism. The demand for the women to vote was simply a product of the supposed raising of woman to equality with man.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's false. It's a dream. Again, are man and woman equal? Before God, yes. Before the judgment seat of God, when all of us go in front of the judgment seat of God, absolutely. And that's what's most important. But in this little life, are men and women equal? No, they're unequal in everything. in everything pertaining to motherhood, women are superior. For instinct and intuition and the sense of what's going on in the children, the sense of what's going on in the little baby. Baby is crying. She knows exactly what it's about. She capiche very fast. She intuits things, which is what the gift that God gave her. Darling, you were telling me 2 months ago that about our boy, and I did. Now I see it. You're right. How did you see it 2 months ago? I don't know. But she did see it. She did see it. It took the man 2 months to capiche, because he was using his mind and he was working it out. It took him 2 months. She got it without knowing why or how. She got it by intuition. So they're very different. But all of these real difference between men and women are just wiped out today, because in our imaginary dream world, our modern imaginary dream world, we are remaking human nature. And yet old human nature has a way of coming back. You know about around, I would guess, 1920, when there were no dictating machines, when the feminine secretary was used to take down dictation from the boss, G.K. Chesterton quipped, the girls all stood up and said, "We will not be dictated to." And then they went off and became shorthand typists. And that's human nature coming round the back door. Because the secretary, the girl's secretary, is fulfilling a feminine role alongside the boss. From the point of view of morals, it's dangerous, unquestionably dangerous. How many bosses will have committed adultery or fornication with their pretty little secretary? The modern office is made for immorality, you could say. But in any case, that she sort of depends on the boss, that she listens to the boss, that she serves the boss, that he's a man and she should be a woman, completely normal. Completely normal. It's feminine human nature coming back. And so she refuses to be subordinate to her husband, but she'll go off to the office and work for a boss. And the feminists, recently, in the last 5-10 years, there are always signs of some of the feminists understanding that they want to be back with the men. And you get in these women's magazines constantly these articles about, feminism, how the women want to be feminine again, but feminism continues. Because it's part of the whole great modern dream. And to go back to the old idea of woman means going back to the whole old-fashioned world in which woman is under man and man is under God. And nobody wants to go back to God. Nobody wants to go back to God. Therefore, the women, even if they'd like to be under a man, under a good man, they're going to pretend and keep on saying, "No, I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to." It's crazy. Nuts. It's the defiance of reality. It just goes on and on and on. It gets heavier and heavier and worse, because the one answer is to go back to God, and the one answer that people do not today want is to go back to God. And therefore the mess just goes on.